Starting in 3.
Good evening. Thanks for attending the Complete Street Safety Committee. Now we're going to bring the meeting to an order. It's 6:31 p.m., May 3rd, 2023. We're waiting for the agenda. Not yet. We do have the email. I see the camera now. Yes, if you could enlarge it, that would be great. So if I recall correctly, we don't need to allow the preamble, right?
Correct. Christian?
Okay, help me out here. So
Called to order, so next is roll call.
you were doing roll call
Cabrera,
here.
Detmer, Strecker, I'm sure, I think they're still doing roll call at council, so Cabrera
Here.
or I,
Aye.
Detmer,
Aye.
Strecker,
Aye.
Wozniak.
Aye.
All right.
Do we have any oral communications?
No oral communications at this time.
We do.
I'm sorry, we do have
No, okay.
a
No,
resident that
no
wants
electronic
to do some
or communications at this time.
Can you hear me? We can, but the public
We
probably
can.
can't.
With the speaker, I don't think is on.
I think you're on now. You're our first speaker since COVID, so please, go ahead.
Excellent. My name is Christina Plarkowski. I've lived in Brisbane now about 12 years. I am both a transit advocate and a commuter bicyclist. I want to make that distinction because we tend to think of cycling as a recreation rather than an essential form of transportation. And I'm here to offer myself as one of the people here in Brisbane who's interested in this topic and wants to help support you. However, this meeting time is terrible for me So I'm identifying myself as somebody who's interested in bringing an infrastructure, not just a table every May where we give away bananas and tote bags. We really need to start developing a plan so that anytime there is work done in the city on the streets, we can start implementing that plan even incrementally. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
So yeah, thank you very much for coming. And in the 2023 working plan, we have several bicycle related topics, and we would definitely appreciate and quite frankly need the type of input that you will provide to us, especially you making the distinction that you do this as a commute, not just recreation. Do you guys have any comments you would like to add?
No, thank you for coming forward and for volunteering. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. I'm guessing we have the,
Great. Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of April?
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Cabrera,
Yeah.
Detmer,
Yes.
Strecker,
Aye.
and Wozniak.
Aye.
Approve of the minutes of approved. Okay, so now we're going to get into the agenda, which is a interesting topic, all business, investigation of residential parking permit program for Central Brisbane. So as we know, the council presented a report from staff that they gather or they put together from all the work that the committee has done. And then they, what ended up happening was, they had among themselves, some differences, how to, in terms of the whole program itself. And we also got some comments from different residents. So council is telling us to revisit, to watch the video of the meeting, and to revisit all the points that they felt, that they need for their work. So in that regards, Linda put together a letter, and also staff took some notes, and then the rest of the committee was asked to watch the video, and I think we all did, and now we have comments.
Greg also.
So I just wanted to organize it in a way that we're going to be, time effective and at the same time target effective. And we also appreciate, having Commander Garcia being here, because I'm sure he's going to be a lot of help for us to go through those, questions that we distilled from that meeting. We want to get to the bottom of it. So can we put the why don't we start with the staff notes? You could put that on the screen. Okay. In general, before I get into the details and the questions that came out from that meeting, I know in the past, Council Colleen has advocated for us to take one item at a time as a committee and not do a subcommittee. But just as a little background, I did reach out to in an email to Council Colleen and also Karen, that what we're going to do is we're going to go over this question as a committee, And once we have all the answers, I would like to, meet with them or have them, meet with us, because I feel that, and probably you guys feel the same, that some of these questions we have addressed as a committee, and we would like to, for the sake of the agenda of the program that we put together for 2023, that actually we worked on it 2 months already, and we were like excited to do that. So we want to see and get more clarification. What is the scope and of this new, going over again, the parking permit program in Brisbane, and try to, narrow down and see if we could create a subcommittee so we don't have all those, the other topics, sacrifice the other topics. So if you guys have any comments in that regards, I think we could probably take maybe 5 to 7 minutes talking a little about what would be your philosophy to handle this, and then we could go into each question.
So yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, kind of after just getting a fresh look, I looked at it a month ago, and I looked at the meeting, the council meeting. I watched the video a month ago, and I watched it this morning to give myself a second refresher on what it was that they kind of discussed over there. And I think some of the points seem that they're asking for clarification on, and what they're looking at least from what I saw, at the council meeting, were some changes, but it doesn't seem like it's actually that many changes compared to what we kind of already put out there in terms of the product. And so it might be good to see how long it takes to go today, but I also kind of like the idea if it goes further than today, to start looking and see if we can do that, where we can meet with the council and try to create maybe a subcommittee for specific to the parking program, so we can really have a focus group on that section, as you said, so I think that's a good idea too. But I think some of the basic ones I got from the council meeting to me was, it sounds like they would like, and correct me if I'm wrong, to try to be to start out to try to make it more of a single, like a certain number of streets, maybe not the entire zoning, which I know we looked into before, but we can talk about that, of course, today. And then I think the other one was, it sounded like they wanted a reduction, either a reduction or an increase in the hours of enforcement. The 6, I remember one, I think Lacken it was, mentioned, or Mackin, I think, no, it was Lentz that mentioned 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. enforcement. And then it was Terry and Madison mentioned 24-hour enforcement. So if the car was parked for over 24 hours, then without a permit, then that could be.
Yeah. So, so I mean, I appreciate the your answer in terms of, I guess your initial answer is actually what I was looking for, just to get a feel how the committee, my mindset is in terms of handling this big project that we have worked for quite some time. We are all familiar with it, but now going forward, we're going to go over the notes from staff, and if there's if the staff missed something, we could add on. But in general, like I said, after this meeting, I would like to meet with council and then sort of have an idea how to move forward with the possibility to just create a subcommittee and keep going with this project and try to also work with the other projects. But yeah, I appreciate your response. Do you have any comments, Darius?
So With this, what we're looking at right here, this is essentially the staff feedback, comments on what was talked about. Is typical what happens next is, I guess, we would want to come back with a revision and answer these sort of questions specifically, or is it sort of a revision of the document we originally had sent to council, the proposal, for example?
Well, I mean, there'd be another staff report. Yeah.
So, okay, so I guess that would be one option, is to have a revised staff report that we would then sort of suggest if we want to address these points. That's one option. And then I guess, okay, yeah, I think your approach, going through this today at some point and then going back in discussion, if that's an option, I think that sounds good. I think there's also, we've, gone through this a lot. So I think we can address most of these with what our previous discussions were and our notes. And so we can, I guess, take a look, see where we end today as well. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Linda?
What I noticed is that there were multiple comments on the same topic at the council meeting, and that a lot of the stuff that was brought up, we already have investigated. It just, there was no opportunity to respond to people at that point. I don't think we need to go back to the council and ask for any more advice at this point, but simply go through what are the things that we really didn't look at, like multi-generational homes. Something that's just a little bit more solid to bring back about how we're going to deal with that, nailing down some of the gray areas. We do have a vote deadline, and it looks like this is something that's going to want to go on the 2024 ballot. And I understand from the city attorney that it takes at least 6 months prior to the vote that for them to do the language and get it submitted. So we don't have as much time as we thought to work through this process. And I think it would be a good idea for us to identify what are the things that we haven't worked on and have gray areas, and create subcommittees within the committee to brainstorm about that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so with that said, I think let's get into the topics that staff put together, and if we have time, we're gonna get into Linda's point. But if they are the same, obviously we don't need to do that. One of the things that we so as we are processing this topics, we could probably have like different buckets. Some of them could be like administrator oriented or something that staff could take care, and some other ones could be more philosophical. And for the sake of time, let's try to be more on the point. And then other ones are going to be more, like technical. So let's go ahead. The first one is emergency parking situation. How do we handle? So when they talk about emergency parking situation, this one could be, I guess, bundled with other things like, people that they've mentioned a lot, people that could be visiting somebody, they're dropping food or taking care of somebody and doesn't have a permit. So the question is, how do you handle those cars so they don't get a fine? But having said that, the other thing to keep in mind is, from what I gather from their discussion, is they're sort of moving away from what we have originally suggested, to get a third party to take care of this. And now the thinking is more like, let's do what, we did talk about this. Let's do zone, and we're going to do a trial, like a pilot study, and we're going to use stickers. So keep that in mind in the sense that we don't want to answer all these questions, and then the council is sort of like saying, we're going to go on this direction, or we could go ahead and answer all the questions, knowing that a lot of the thinking was, let's do a zone type of pilot study, and let's use stickers, to sort of solve this.
You know, some of their thoughts we didn't really get a chance to even respond to after the presentation. They didn't refer everything back to staff, but I think we're still of a mind to do license plate reading. Right? Mic on.
Yes,
If I,
that would be if yes, that would be the most efficient way to do it. Is still a license plate reader program.
I don't think there was that much there was no discussion. They just kind of, and when you say the council, there were 5 and they all had different thoughts. So there was no one unified thought that we got from them. So, you know, from a couple of them, they talked about a particular thing doesn't mean, I don't think they gave clear direction that we want this and not that. I think they said, there are these one-off situations and we want them to be codified. We don't want to say like on a case by case, somebody will be deciding if my adult daughter can come back home and live and have an extra car. We want to know what the rules are going to be. We want to know what the rules are going to be if someone has to come over in an emergency. Linda has a flood and she calls her daughter and she drives over and they deal with the, you know, are they going to have to go online and put their license plate in as a guest, or is there a different situation for that? And then they were concerned about the cost to do the enforcement. That's, I think, why Cliff asked about 6 to 10 p.m. So that's, staff will look into that with Laz, whether they have personnel, because what they told us is 10 to 6, they would need to hire staff just for us. So are there different hours that still make sense that could be incorporated into the facility or the equipment or the manpower that they have? But we do, you know, we didn't discuss license plate reading and staff still strongly recommends staying with that. I don't know, it was also an interesting conversation about wanting to be able to call in on a car that didn't belong on the street, where we were trying to propose a really anonymous, because they talked about that people can call and it can be complaint based, but they didn't talk about the fact that a lot of people say they don't want to be the one to call. And my neighbor knows when I'm the one that calls. I don't want to be. We want that Laz meter maid just to drive down the street and send the tickets. That was the concept I think that the committee came up with.
So I mean, that was one of the reasons why I said, you know, we're going to plow through this and, you know, and try to have a meeting with them to try to have more, to try to see if they could unify more of the thinking to have more clarity. Because, you know, like I said, some of these topics we're going to be recycling, and in my opinion, you know, we have other a working program that is going to be sacrificed if we just keep going in the same chasing our tail, so to speak. But to your point, the council, you know, they had different opinions. And then how do we go about managing those expectations? Like if let's say one council thought, okay, you know, the plate reader is the way to go, but the other one is thinking, why don't we do the sticker and the pilot study in one street? And so when you answer those questions, you need to more or less know in what content you're going to answer. Are you going to answer it like this emergency parking situation? Do we just answer it as if we're continue thinking that the you know, hiring a third party to handle it with the plate reader, or one contact? You know, you sort of structure our answers to, you know, to get somewhere with what they want, provided that they were not as specific and they were all over the place. It's going to be a little challenging here.
Okay, that's a good question. I think a couple of things. 2 liaisons have, typically you use a subcommittee because they're the most interested in the topic and they kind of have the pulse of that topic. There's an infrastructure subcommittee, there's a budget subcommittee of the council, and they want to be there's a planning subcommittee. And when that subcommittee recommends something to the full council, the rest of them say, you did the deep dive, we're going to back what you recommend here. I don't think we have that case with this parking thing because it's as sensitive as you all know it is. You guys didn't want to put your name on it. If I lived in the town, I don't know if I would want to be the one that says, I think this is the way it should be. So we've got 5 people with varying I don't know if they're even, each one of them is sure what the program should look like for themselves. And I don't know if they will coalesce even as a majority around, we don't know if we'll get a program out of this, but I think that we need to come back one more time with basically the bones of what you guys present. It came, decided and recommended with details about the questions that came up. And if they reject it, they reject it. And then maybe we've done what we've done. But I think we need to continue on the path that we started on, but address then the nuances and the inconsistencies that came up at the council meeting.
If I may. Just touching back on not wanting to put our names on it. I didn't want to put my name on it because that wasn't our job. Our job was to come up with the information and not to take a vote on whether or not we agreed with it, but it was the best work that we could do as a group. And if I needed to put my name on it, I would, because I worked very hard on it and so did everybody else. But it wasn't like our vote was going to mean anything. It's a presentation from our entire committee. So I just wanted to be clear about why I was reluctant to do that. It's a committee assignment and not an individual assignment. Whether I agree with wanting parking permits or not is irrelevant. I took this job and I'm going to do the best I can. As for going back to the liaisons and asking them for more help, some of them have many, many, many committees that they need to pay attention to. They've given us our information to the best of their ability. We've all been asked to go back and watch the video. I think all of us have. And to pull from there, what are the items that we need to address? And we know that we addressed some things very deeply that could not be responded to during that meeting at open comment. The council couldn't respond. So I think liaison time is important to respect and not keep bringing them in every time we have a question, but rather addressing it amongst ourselves and trying to move forward from there. There's just a few things that I see that came up that were not things that we discussed, and I think those are the things we should pull out of all of this. And I think Greg made a really great list also. Mine you can throw away. It was useless compared to these two. And, just see what is it that we missed and then either work together or create subcommittees to kind of brainstorm on that and bring it back for our next meeting and report on that, and then see if the rest of the committee agrees or wants to add anything. And that would probably be our cleanest way to go forward with this. And I hope I get some agreement.
Okay. No, definitely those are, very good points, and we could spend all night, just going in circles and trying to figure out what would be the best approach, provided, what transpired in that meeting. To my opinion, what we did to a certain extent was quite frankly rejected. So, but these questions at the same time, we feel that we answer them. So let me go ahead and answer the first one, and then we could go, to the next committees and then give staff a crack at it. And I guess if you don't feel comfortable, just say pass. Or also, we're going to have an opportunity to work this with more time and then provide our answers by writing, because sometimes we don't have the information in front of us, or we need to do a little research or thinking. So for emergency parking situation, how do we handle that? So in my opinion, if we are thinking, that we're going to have a third party, contractor managing, as we had said, then I think we definitely need to ask them what are the ways of them handling, emergency parking situation. My guess is it might be something similar to guest parking, and also how to, if these companies maybe there, the communication that we could have with them, it could be almost at a real time. You know, we could send an email, and then they could respond, and we could send them a license number, a license plate number, and they could make sure that they get that information, and then that situation will be resolved like that. If that's going to incur costs, I don't know. That will be the contractor policy, how they handle that. In terms of if we go with the sticker, and then I'm assuming the sticker will have to involve Brisbane, police personnel. One of the things that they said that one of the residents said was you could print a paper and just put it on the dashboard, and then that would take care of that emergency parking situation. So that would be, the two scenarios depending on how to go that I see that we could, address that question. So that's my feedback. Gregory?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with definitely a lot of that. I also think that with the emergency parking situation, I think we were, you correct me if I'm wrong, but we were talking about before any type of, like, if they got a ticket, for example, let's say they didn't have a parking permit, they couldn't get to the computer on time to put their license plate number in for the temporary guest parking that we were talking about, or that we've discussed before, and they got a ticket. I think we were talking about like an appeal process, right, for citations, if I recall. And that kind of just meant them putting in like a notice letter in saying, hey, this is what happened on that day. I meant to put in the number, but I am a resident and I already have a permit, and I'm just trying to get a guest permit for my friend, but they happen to get the ticket. Can you take this ticket away from me? I don't think emergency parking situations would be like, if they couldn't get the parking permit, they could easily appeal it, even with our current setup. And then at least that's what I thought on that.
No, those are very good point. Definitely an appeal system. If it's too late, if they didn't get the information on time, there should be some prerogative that they will give the person that happens in real parking tickets too. You could go ahead and fight it. So I definitely agree. So that needs to be in place. Darius?
Sorry, I was clearing my throat, but I guess I'm wondering, is there maybe a more efficient way to do this and going, I guess, point by point down each one sort of, or because some of them, I guess, do sort of precede each other too. So I don't know if, I do feel like this might take a while if we kind of go through one by one and sort of really discuss in depth if we've already talked about a couple of these. Like, I feel like the parking situation emergency we've discussed a bit, but yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
I'm sure there is, but I mean, those were the questions that popped up, and as we've been saying, I know a lot of them, we feel that we cover them.
Or for example, I guess, maybe a question is like, do we have to, for example, do a trial street? That was the recommendation from a few of the council people. Is that something that if we as a subcommittee already felt very strongly against that, is that something we can just knock off right away and say, hey, we don't like that idea and would not be in favor? Or is that something?
Gregory, we've had the opportunity out there for people to do trial streets for quite a while now. And apparently it's never been, the opportunity's never been taken advantage of. And what I understand further is that no one wants to be the first one to start a petition on their block for a trial parking. I think that one we can just cross off the list because it's been there, it's been available. It's unnecessary at this point to go through those motions, especially with the limited amount of time that we have to work with this. As far as emergency parking situations, I just want to chime in for a second. I think that we need to uncomplicate as much as we can about the work that we're going to be doing. I think a softer approach to the parking permit program is once again one of my favorite things. And since so many people were opposed to the expense of hiring a company to come out and do all of that stuff and hiring additional staff, and the police department can't deal with it, maybe we should go with stickers and to start and offer something like people like nurses, that visiting nurses, food deliveries, things like that. If they're going to be in Brisbane all the time or have several clients, even if they only have one client, we could give them a handicap placard to stick on their mirror for just temporary parking, and they'll be coming and going. We don't need to give them a sticker, but they will be registered, and it's less costly. I think cost was, well, particularly for Councilman Lentz, it was a huge problem. I didn't hear a lot from the other council members about the cost, but I think we're going to get more pushback on the cost.
So I think that you know, although it's not my preference, you know, I feel that if we go question by question, you know, a staff distill this question from the meeting is probably the way to go, because there, as we know, we've been going over it. This is not the first time that this was presented to them. And we have, in some of these questions, they have already made it. So now, in my opinion, they say very specific, get those questions out of the meeting and get them answered. And if we answer the questions, even though some of them, we already talked about, I think we should just answer them, and let's try to be briefly as much as we can. Another idea is once we answer them, then and there's like, if there's multiple answers or approaches, then we could probably, in the next meeting, come to a consensus and harmonize those answers if we have differences among each other. But I think we should go ahead and try to be, answer the questions, and let's be brief about it. I don't know, maybe like a minute per question.
Christian, can I offer another suggestion? That we go down, read these emergency parking situations. We've already worked on that. And we know that we have some information that hasn't been disseminated to the public. So I think we can put that one aside. Trial streets we can put aside. Multi-generational homes we could put aside. Public advisory vote is off the table because we're going to go to a general vote. Codified exceptions, that's something we can add to a list of things. It's like the things that we've already talked about, we can bring that up later, but the ones that we haven't discussed, we should have a list. Like, I think we should start with codified exceptions. Who is a resident? I think we already have that question answered in some of our previous conversations. Work vehicles. We might want to put a little bit of time on that, but we need to shorten this list and just go down right now and figure out which items need more work from us rather than trying to figure it all out, because it's going to take an eternity. And then there's just
so
very little work to do on some of the others.
It looks like we've been debating how to approach this. I know, provided, what we're dealing with, is definitely necessary to have this conversation. But it's a fair point. How many questions we have here, Tomas?
Well, they're all not all questions. Some of them are just notes, like you said, with the public advisory. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have about 11 bullet points.
Do you mind if we look at the notes that I sent earlier?
Yeah, we can pull those up.
Can you put them both up?
I don't think so. But I could have them in different tabs close by.
So we have 11 bullet points. And then, if staff put them together, I think, and like I say, even though we feel that we have answered those, do you, let me put it this way. Do you think you could remember or have some way of answering this question based on our previous discussion?
You're asking staff? I'm a little confused, actually. I don't know if you can see that on my face, because I know that you guys, we came up with a set of recommendations but they asked questions and they wanted us to look at it differently. And I hear dismissing some of these items, like, I mean, ultimately, council will approve or not approve a program. And I heard that they wanted us to look at 5 particular streets, right? Thomas, Tulare, Kings, Alvarado, Humboldt. So we're saying no without even discussing it?
That's exactly my point. I think we need to answer these questions. And because, you know, they're going to get back to us and say, but you didn't answer this question.
I mean, I understand and I agree. The problem might move to the next block. If you can only get 2 permits on Thomas, you might park on San Bruno. But it's something that then, you know, we could keep chasing the problem. Maybe we will end up with a program in all of the city, but some of them think that the problem is focused on some streets and other streets don't have a problem. So
I'm not meaning to dismiss anything at all. I'm just looking at the new stuff that we haven't discussed or that we really need to nail down the ends of. And then going back to things like, you know, the trials, if they're necessary. Like I said, they've been out there and nobody's wanted to do it.
but we can still, the council can decide we're doing it, whether or
Yeah.
not the residents of all 70% have signed a petition, said they wanted it. They can still, just like they could do a program on the whole city. I don't know, would it go to a vote? That kind of doesn't make sense to me, actually, if it's 5 streets and the whole city votes on it.
It doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and the whole town is what we mapped out. And then someone probably who wasn't aware of the fact that it was out there as an opportunity to have trial may have brought that up. I don't recall who brought it up. But I know that, you know, that one's been out there for quite a while and discussed before. So I'm not dismissing anything. I'm just trying to, you know, focus on the stuff that we haven't done. Like we really haven't discussed putting up 72-hour signs. And I know that there's an issue with more signage, but maybe this is one of those places where we need to have the signage. And that's something that's important to discuss because it's new.
Okay,
adding
good.
to
Let
this.
me distill what I thought, what I took from the meeting and what the list kind of addresses. In an emergency, someone's got to come to your house. I hadn't looked at the city of Chicago, but I just looked it up. A person who lives in Brisbane has to, I don't know if they have to have their own permit, but they have to register and prove that they live in Brisbane and set up the system so that they can apply for a guest permit for their guest. That has to be done ahead of time. That's not going to happen in an emergency. I was hoping that you could just go on a website, type in your license plate number and get in, and then maybe you could do that in an emergency anyways. If you just open a window and type in 6 letters, can you do that? But it's a lot harder than that. So that's not going to work for emergencies. Maybe the only answer is that, you know, you have to appeal if you get a ticket because you came and dealt with someone in an emergency. The cost, okay, we're going to talk to Laz about whether they can enforce from 6 to 10. People did say the problem was in the evenings too. So maybe that's a way to keep the cost down on enforcement. Do we want to look at a pilot program on a certain number of streets to be responsive to the council request? That's for the committee to talk about. The multifamily, multi-generational, I think that goes hand in hand with codifying the exceptions. That you've got more than 2 drivers and 2 cars and it's legitimate that you'd be able to park. And can you switch back to our list?
I mean,
Wait, I'm still going, Christian.
no, I know, but what's funny is that we are going in circle here. And what's also interesting is
I haven't finished though. How do you know that? And then work vehicles. We didn't talk about, I drive my work truck and I'm not a big enough contractor to have a yard. Can I park that at home too? Those are all the issues that I think I heard. How do we administer? How do we figure out who lives in town? Staff's got that. We don't need any more discussion. They just didn't let us answer that. Who is a resident? We have, just like every other program, there are ways to establish that you have residency. So I think those are the issues.
Yeah, but okay, maybe I'm not, and I'm gonna apologize if I'm not articulating myself how to approach this in a more efficient way. But what I'm saying, like right now, you just answer about 7 questions. And from a practical matter, when we talk about these things, maybe we could agree, why don't we have a discussion, and then we could have Thomas listen to the discussion and answer these questions, and then provide it to us, and then we look at it and we could agree, yes, that's what we discussed. That would be one way to approach it. Or the other way, more systematically, is just go one by one. Like right now, you just hit about 5 questions, and your answers are, I'm in favor with them. That's what we discussed. So I'm just trying to see how can we, what we say now, or how we're going to approach it. Let's move on. So if you want to have like a topic discussion, and then Tomas comes back and answer these questions that you guys have, I'm good with that. Is that how you guys want to do it?
I'm not understanding what you're saying about Tomas.
I'd like to
coming
take a
back.
vote by the committee on, or at least hear from the rest of the committee how they want to proceed, because this sounds really lengthy. I mean, we've been here, it's almost 7:30 and we haven't accomplished anything.
I
And
agree.
so if the committee wants to speak up on how they'd like to proceed, that would make me happy. Then I would get some input from someone other than the chair so that we can all work together.
I think in terms of, sorry if I'm thinking, I think as staff mentioned before, as Karen mentioned, I think it's only a certain specific ones that they are really asking for. And so my opinion is we just focus on those, in particular, the trial thing, because that seemed like something that the trial streets, I think that was something that they wanted us to look at. In particular, I think whether we do stickers or not, that, even though I think we kind of decided already that's out of the picture, but it's a thought. And the other one was, do we need to change the times of enforcement to decrease the cost?
And how to codify, if you're going to allow, the program is going to allow more people to get permits than the 2 that we originally recommended. And stickers are not less expensive. They're actually more, because it's an item that has to be mailed. A license plate is just an online, you're registered. It's the sticker allows neighbors to turn in neighbors, and the license plate reader doesn't. And we didn't really have a discussion with council about that either. They just kind of went in their own. I mean, we were late in the night, we're kind of the last item, so that was challenging too.
I guess my sort of thought is, yeah, I agree with kind of what Greg had mentioned. I think what staff had mentioned, where there's definitely certain issues. I think the big thing for me is that I feel like a lot of these are also sort of outstanding depending on what Laszlo says. For example, would they do stickers as well? That would not be.
They're just enforcement, so it was the IPC.
Okay, they'd be the ones who are doing the scan. Okay.
They'll do stickers or license plate
Or-
reading, whichever we want, the city wants to pay for.
I guess you'll be able to get like the price breakdown for all those different options. So that would be one of the items we could.
So to get a permit from the company IPC or IPS, sorry, I'm not remembering, is the highest cost was $20 per. And that was, if you used a credit card to pay, that was $4. If they had to mail a sticker, that was like $6. So I think if you just go online and get a license plate, and you maybe don't pay with credit card, you pay with debit, it's $10. So the range is $10 to $20
But that's for the whole town coverage, not like 5 blocks, for instance. Would they do only 5
per
blocks?
each. Per each. $5,000 setup fee, no matter how many, and $10 to $20 per permit.
So, I mean, I'm still a little puzzled here. So we're going to go discussion format here. Is that do we put that in a vote then?
Just agree. Whatever you, yeah. You had asked the question, so.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted to put it to a vote. So, I mean, if we're going to go in discussion, I mean, I just wanted, get a consensus. So then let's start with one point, and then we all chime in, and then we move to the next point. Because what it seems is like we want to have a discussion, and then we threw 3 points altogether, and then that's a little confusing. So one of the main points that I hear that you guys, that we should tackle is the trial and the sticker, right? Because my feedback on that is that we talked about it. That's related to the zone, and as actually was also discussed in the meeting, people are going to be moving to other streets, so it's not going to make a lot of sense. But then some of the council members were saying, it's a valid point that some people don't have problems with parking, and they're going to feel that they're bearing the burden of the people that they do. So why don't we do a pilot study, sort of like a zone or trial per street, and the way that they want to handle this? Because if you go with the third-party contract to manage this, it's not going to be feasible for them to do it, per street. As far as we know, I don't know if we have asked that question. So the way would be to do a stickers, and they put that out there. So do we put that into a vote among the committee and say, is that something that we think it could work? We do a trial and we use the stickers, because I think several council says we could learn a lot from it, and then we could what we learned, then we could implement it and then put that in the to vote. And as we know, if you do that, we might not meet the timeline to vote, because we only have about 6 months before the elections. They need 6 months to work everything out to put it on the election ballot. So the question would be, how do we feel about that point? Do we say, as a committee, can we do a vote and say, as a committee, we don't agree with that because people are just going to go to the different streets and the problem is not going to be solved? Or we think it's a valid idea, we shouldn't punish the other people that have no problems with parking, and just test out the people who have problem with parking. And ultimately, this is going to be somewhat enforced by the police department here in Brisbane, and we have Commander Garcia to also chime in on this.
So with the police department enforcing it, currently we don't have the current staff to do so. We would have a cost as well. Whether that cost can easily surpass LAS, I can see that happening. You're talking about a staff member being here, you're talking total compensation for an employee, adding another employee, hiring their employee, training that employee. We could, on a pilot program, you're going to easily surpass what LAS can definitely provide for you right away. It would take us a while to recruit someone to get that person up and running into the classes. So I don't recommend that we implement it, especially if we're talking soon, because we would have some initial startup time for that. So I don't know. I'm just saying right now, it's probably not going to be feasible to be cheaper than LAS if we wanted to try this as a pilot. Pilot's great because you put the pilot in place. Everyone says, no, we don't want it. You kill the program. We hire somebody, we're going to have to reallocate that personnel somewhere. So that's one of the things that we need to, let council know that if we do want us to do it, we don't have the current staffing to do so. We would have to hire somebody, and then that person would then be an employee if it didn't work out. So I'm recommending that we stay with LAS in a format with a third party. If not LAS, maybe, the committee goes back and looks for other vendors that can do it part-time. But as far as that police department aspect of it, at this point, we can't handle that. I'm not sure if that changes the discussion or if that kind of,
I would say to me, that definitely does.
right? So,
but I would also say, I wonder, can we get if we just could let the company, could we see what the difference would be if it was just I mean, they gave us 5 different street names. So that's like still pretty much all of central Brisbane still that they were talking about city council.
It's a lot less. Five streets is, and I don't know if not clear if they meant end to end or certain parts are a bigger problem than other
Yeah,
parts.
I mean, I know they mentioned Tulare, they mentioned Kings.
I got Thomas, Tulare, Kings, Alvarado, Humboldt.
Yeah, and that's what I got too. But that's pretty much almost every street in central Brisbane. So, I mean, you're just adding a couple more streets to that.
No, there's like,
I mean, there's a
there's
lot
like
more.
20, there's more
Yeah.
than that. There's a lot more than that.
I have a question. Does it make sense to have staff come up with what the difference in cost would be to use LAS versus hiring another officer? Because I suspect hiring another officer, even for the trials, would be significantly more expensive. And if they could see that, it might sway them one way or another.
Okay, I don't think the council was set that staff that we needed to have our police forces enforce this. What we didn't know, what we haven't investigated yet is whether LAS could do part-time or could do 6 to 10 PM as a part-time. We need to contact them and find out if that's possible.
Okay.
I think we're talking about city staff. If there is no vendor that can do it for us on a part-time, on a smaller basis than we originally asked about.
Okay, so based on our discussion, should we put I mean, should we just leave it like that and have Tomas take notes on this discussion point, or should we put into a vote and said, there's too many cons for this trial, pilot thing, so we just kind of vote on it and say we don't recommend it?
I just want to add something else to what you said. We don't know that everybody's going to move to a different street. That's hypothesis. It's not fact. So I think that's why council was suggesting it. Let's see what happens. Maybe it's not convenient to go park 3 blocks away with your 2 extra cars and switch them out all the time. It's not convenient to tandem park in your driveway even, So I don't think you can say everyone will do that. I don't think that's a fair statement. So I think the question is, does the committee think it's worth trying these potential 5 streets, 5 blocks?
Well, we need that piece of information to have a better understanding, how much partial cost can that third contractor do? What are they called again? LAS?
LAS, L-A-Z.
Amazing. That's, yeah. So to make a call on that, at least that's my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
And I agree. I think I'd be open to something like, I think we've discussed this idea and there is the option to set up your own program, but since many of the council members did bring up the option of doing trials, I think if LAS can, accommodate that and it sort of is at a cost that's proportional, then that could be one route that we could move forward with as a recommendation. But I think we need to find out the costs on that side. And if it's even possible, they might come back and say it's not even a possibility and we have to do all the town.
And I would say the same thing. I think we moot this point to
How about you,
find out what
Linda?
the cost difference would be, or if they could even do it.
So it looks like Gregory, Darius, and myself would definitely need that information from LAS to make a final call on that point, and Linda has no comments. So what is, can we move on, or do you have something else to say, Karen?
No, I think we can move on.
It's 7:30 and we want to make the 8 o'clock. So what's another topic that we definitely need to look as a whole? I think we're talking about codifying exceptions to parking without a permit or allowing more than 2 per address. In certain cases, evaluation of sites was mentioned. So this one could be bundled with the regenerations, or because essentially they're asking for an exceptions where a household is going to need more than 2 parking permits. So that would be the case where you have, multi-generation situations. So how do we go about it? You want to take a crack, Darius?
I was going to say, I guess work vehicles could also fall under this if it's, if it's a certain codified rule, like, 2 vehicles per, as we previously discussed, and any additional vehicle is a higher cost. Then I could see sort of all of these being addressed by that and sort of no additional exceptions other than, unless of course there's some, unless we want to, have a codified, say, multi-generational family. If there's proof of that, then it's a different, right? I think that's open to discussion. I think it'd be the simplest to sort of say you have 2 permits per address and then additional ones are at cost. But I do think that some of these things we should probably discuss some more. Yeah, like work vehicle, I feel like that might be one where it might just be at a cost, but something like a family situation, we might want to dig in a little bit.
I believe at the meeting, someone mentioned that we could even raise the cost on a work vehicle because it is tax deductible.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we can kind of incorporate a little bit what we talked about before, but I think that is a good point for the households, for example, where you might have 7 people renting out rooms in one house, for example. And so there might be 7 different people that are subletting a house or something like that. And so do we then, which person in that household gets the, the increase in cost, or if they can prove that it's a sublet household, which actually shouldn't be too hard if they have lease agreements, then maybe they just each get the original price for each vehicle, like the $20, $40, whatever we said for their permit. That's kind of my thought.
You want to shim in, Karen?
I missed a little bit of what you were saying in the beginning, the very beginning.
I was just saying, kind of incorporating what we've already talked about with more than 2 permits. I think Darius mentioned that as well, but just making an exception for like households, for example, that might have.
Yeah, what did you mean by sublease? Oh, like
subleased houses. So like maybe they're renting 7 rooms in a house or something like that, and there's 7 different parties involved in that house. Do we charge extra, or how do we charge the extra than the 2? And or there's only a certain number. That was something that I think the council mentioned. If you have 7 people in the house, but they're technically only supposed to have 2 spots on the street, how do you charge that? Or do you charge more? But then if they're all separate households, how do you do that? If that makes any sense.
Well, I don't know that they'd be part of the same address. So I guess you've got a multi-generational family potential situation, or you have a house that's subleased like on Silicon Valley or whatever, where it's an incubator. Yeah. So I think Commander Garcia had some thoughts about that.
So I heard what council said, and let's say you have 7 people in the house, or let's say 5, and whether it's mother and father, and then parents, and then 3 kids, but they all drive. If you can prove that you live at that address, that's your car, I believe you should get a permit. I mean, that addresses, hey, all my kids moved back in because they just can't afford the rent in San Francisco, so they're all living here. If you can prove that's your vehicle, you live there, then you should get a permit. This would definitely curb someone having 2 drivers and they just decided to buy because we can have 5 cars. And now you're spilling out in the street. So you're really cleaning up excess cars that aren't being used. I mean, if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 driver, 1 car, they're using it and it's going to get moved.
Up to a certain number, or just?
Well, I mean, if they live there, I mean, if 2 families decide to live together and there's bunk beds in each room, I mean, they're making it work. That's what we have to do for housing crisis. So you give them the permit as long as they have a driver for each car. I don't think 1 driver should have 3 cars, but 1 driver can have 1 car. And that would be fair. If that was my family, that would be fair. I don't know about how the committee feels.
So you can't codify like, okay, you've got an aging grandparent that still has a driver's license but doesn't drive. You can't codify that.
Correct. I mean, you would have to, I guess, there's not, I don't know how many of those situations there's going to be. I think that the masses are going to be to address, I have 3 kids to live at home and we only have, I can't just give me 2 permits.
So how does the committee feel about that? You want to have an upper limit? You want to allow more than 2?
You want to shim in, Linda?
I think we need to maybe consider doing a subcommittee at this point and have a couple of people work on this, noodle out some of these things. If that aging grandparent bought a car, they would need a permit. the one with the driver's license, it doesn't drive. If they decided they wanted to drive again, they'd need a permit. So I think, cars and permits need to go together. It sounds like, I'm just thinking out loud. There's a lot to take in here, and it's sad to waste a month until we come back and try to figure it out again. So if we had like a subcommittee of 2 people possibly that could maybe brainstorm, and I recommend you guys down there if you're willing, simply because it's a lot to chew on. That codification in itself is going to be a tough one to noodle out. So if someone spent some time talking it over coffee or whatever, and trying to come up with all the nuts and bolts that need to be considered, that would give us a big leg up next month, because it's important. I think there's a couple of other subcommittees that could be had here, but that seems to be one of the bigger issues, the codification.
Yeah,
It's
so.
where the exceptions get covered. Yeah.
So, that's a good suggestion, and I'm sure we're gonna, come around that. Staying with the question, so the way I see this, because essentially the question is, you're gonna have a situation where you're gonna have a household that is gonna have more than 2 cars, right? And then this could also extrapolate to a building that doesn't have specific parking spaces for those tenants. And also perhaps a household that has a trade vehicle, like a little truck or whatever. So how do we deal with this? One central question, in my opinion, is, and this was brought up in the meeting, do we have an idea of what is the capacity, physical capacity of vehicles, that Brisbane can accommodate? I don't think we have that. It will be a very elaborate exercise to come up with that. But at the same time, we cannot discard, just not having a limit on how many permits you're going to give, because essentially you might end up in the same, with the same problem for different reasons, right? And especially for those streets that are already at 90% capacity. So it's a tough one. I definitely feel that, the 2 parking deal came because if you think about a house, you could essentially park 2 cars in front of the house, and you could block your own driveway, and then another one just a little bit in front of your house. So that's almost a given. But that's, we know that people are going to have more cars, and I think we did mention that we could definitely accommodate more car, but we never said like how many more cars. But we also say I think we talked a little bit about the 3rd car. It should be more challenging to get a permit. You have to make the case, just not like in terms of making it more expensive, but also have some sort of building criteria. Like, what do you feel? Where do you fall in that category in terms of, are you a tenant in a building that doesn't have parking space, or are you a household that has a trade vehicle, or you are in a house that has a multi-generation home? So maybe in the application, we should have some of those criteria.
If I may, I think that all falls under codification. It's part of how we're going to deal with those exceptions. And I really think we need a subcommittee.
I would, I do agree with that. I think might be good for further discussion in subcommittee, the codification aspects in particular. I think that of all the topics that the council brought up, I think That's the one that needs the most, real thought about it. And I think kind of going back to what I kind of liked going back to what Commander Garcia said, which was the name goes with the car.
Right.
One person gets one car, one permit, and that's it in the house. As long as your address is at the house and you have one car, that's what you get. Now, if you want a second car with the same name on that car, then that's when we need to start penalizing you. Not penalizing. I guess that's not
Adding fees.
Adding
Yeah.
fees, basically, right, to the parking, because now you're taking up way more space than what you're due. But theoretically, you should be due one car, one person, right?
Mhm. And that's the things that you guys will noodle out the exceptions to.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of doing a subcommittee, sort of hammer out some more, because I think we have a lot more to handle and not enough time probably. I guess, what is the sort of rules regarding subcommittees and number of people that can be on them? And
Less
how
than
that,
a quorum, so 2.
so two.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do I hear volunteers?
I would volunteer to be
I'll
on the
volunteer.
committee.
Yeah.
Given that we can get some maybe advice from staff on which points especially to hammer out, I think, or maybe we can agree on. I think we know the codified ones, but maybe, there's maybe 1 or 2 other points we'd want to
Well,
look
you
at.
can probably brainstorm and come up with a whole bunch more points that need to be looked at here. There's so many variables.
I think the other one that was big, which kind of we have to wait to see what the what Laz I wrote it down now. What Laz says about, and I think that was the big one, is the hours. That whether we stick to the 10 to 6 a.m. I think that we chose before, or that we presented before, or maybe we just say, okay, maybe I think the 2 options that they mentioned were 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 24 hours. Like, you have a parking permit, and if you're parked for more than 24 hours, you need to have a permit. What's the other option?
Okay, so in terms of the codified section, we're going to go ahead and create a subcommittee, and that's Darius and Gregory, provided that I mean, I'm not sure how much. Well, Colleen had expressed that she would like everybody to work on one topic, so we could just probably just have that caveat in mind. If she pushes back and say, no, I want everybody to work on this. But for right now, I 100% agree that we should have subcommittees for some of these topics. So let's assume, that's going to be okay. So then it will be Darius and Gregory for that one topic. So you were saying, Gregory, the next, so no more comments on that topic? Should we move to another one?
I just want to say that, having a subcommittee doesn't preclude the rest of the committee from being part of what they bring back as their information. It's for all of us to share and explore further, or agree with, or bring up questions. And so it's not like they're going to be making decisions. They're just going to brainstorm and then bring things back.
No, I know how subcommittees work, and we had this discussion with Pat and so forth, and Colleen Shimin. I just wanted to say that caveat. So the other topic you were alluding to is the time. Is that, can we scroll down to that one, Thomas? Okay. Enforcement hour adjustment, part-time servers for lower costs, staff to contact Laz. So would this one be somewhat related to the, finding out if they're able to do, part-time?
Yeah, so these are, I mean, just hearing these, so like the top of my list is trial streets, is that feasible? And how much would adjustment in the hours cost? That's the top of my list. We were aware of these issues before, wanted to touch base, but going forward, I'm gonna reach out to Laz and ask both those questions.
So is that it there? Cool. Who has another opinion in terms of another topic to get? We are at 7:45. We have 15 more minutes.
I guess the only other one I see here is a signage in the bottom there that we haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah.
I think that maybe, I think his recommendation is sort of, increase awareness potentially, right? And of the current limits. And so I'm not sure how much, we'd want to recommend something like that, or is that something, where we would think that might have a need for that. But I thought that was an interesting idea to sort of remind people that that already exists and that is already a limit.
And we might have to change that to 24 hours, depending on what recommendations we make and what's accepted. I like the idea of 24-hour parking and not having to report and then wait another 72 hours. It just kind of cleans things up quicker.
Yeah, and I would agree too. I think, not that, I mean, obviously we have to see what Laz comes back with on that, but I think that when I heard that suggestion about 24 hours, it did kind of, what is it that we're trying to solve, right? And so if what we're trying to solve is, for example, airport parking. And I think just recently I saw on some social media
I saw that.
a
Yeah.
post about they actually saw someone doing that, took pictures of them, and they even admitted
And
to it. Those
mentioned
people,
it,
and
yeah.
admitted that they were doing it. But and so if what we're trying to solve is a lot of that is part of it, and there's other issues too, but that would definitely solve that part of the problem of if you can only park in Brisbane, and also solve some of the emergency situations potentially as well, right? If someone has to come over for 5 hours, they're not going to get a ticket because they're here for 5 hours. They're going to get a ticket if they're parked there for 24 hours. Just something to think. Yeah.
Cool. Karen, you have any comments on that topic?
So, parking for 24 hours, I mean, I kind of caught part of your discussion, but if someone calls in and says a vehicle's been there for 24 hours, we can't take that per se because someone could embellish that. It could be there for 20 hours and then all of a sudden it gets a ticket. And then we don't have any way to refute that someone can say, hey, I just parked and now I got a ticket because someone embellished and said I've been there for a week. So when you say 24 hours, when you call, let's take, for example, a 72-hour rule. Someone calls in and says, hey, this car's been here for 3 weeks. We want it tagged. That time doesn't start until we put that tag on the vehicle. Because we can't, because there are undesirables that will embellish that. In the past, we've had someone do that and literally the engine was still warm. So obviously we saw proof of that. And like you said, what is your intent? What we have a hard time is when individuals or residents see someone get out of a car with their luggage, hop in Uber. We don't get that call. We don't get that call. It does circulate out there, but we don't get that call because we can mark it then. Because our warning is just a warning. It's not punitive yet, unless it stays there for more than 72 hours. So, but the time only starts when we get out there and tag it. It doesn't, we can't take what they say as the law. So that's part of the time.
Commander, just to clarify, did you say if someone actually sees someone park, get out and get in an Uber with their suitcases, you can tag it if you're called then?
Yeah, because I mean, we have no problem. We can start the 72-hour process. Because remember, it's just a warning tag. So if they come back in 24 hours, then they're mad because there's a sticker on it. But if they really left for 5 days on a trip to the Bahamas, well, then their car won't be there when they get back.
Okay, I figured.
Yeah, I mean,
Never mind.
I mean, obviously, if it's that egregious where, hey, you just got 2 luggages in the Uber, I don't recognize you, my neighbors don't recognize you, call it in so that we can go out there and address the issue.
That's good information.
And that's what we, Well, I mean, there's things that we look into. We run straight. We either run registration or we ask the neighbors, hey, this person. But remember, what we're doing is only a warning. It's not punitive. That red sticker is not punitive. So we haven't done anything punitive on the person. It only becomes punitive when we tow it after 72 hours.
My thought about 24 is that might be too short. Does everybody here move their car every 24 hours? If you work from home and you walk places, sometimes you don't even move your car. So then now everybody's getting tickets.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about the 24 hours as part of the parking permit program.
Right,
kind of
me
concept.
too.
So that, your car can be parked for less than 24 hours on any street without a parking permit. But if you don't have that parking permit, so like, for example, Laz could come once a day, right? They could come every day at 7 p.m., right? Do their rounds. And if a car is still parked there after that 24 hours in the same exact spot, and they don't have a permit, then they can ticket them for that. I guess that's the way I was kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
And that is a possibility. It works in the HOA where I lived out before. What happens is they take the plate, they put it in a queue, and that queue sits. The next time they come out in 48 hours, if it's still there, then they get the ticket, because then that queue now is effective. So that would be a question for Laz, if they can queue a plate for a pending until it gets ran again after it becomes an active violator, right? So they validate it's still there, yes. And that would probably address the issues of, well, I think when the council member said, well, what if someone came overnight because I fell and they need to be with me when I'm sick? Then it would address that issue as well. So I think you just killed two birds with one stone there, if that is possible for Laz.
Question for you, is that easier to do with license plate readers because it's digital?
Yes, so the license plate, you would have to adopt a license plate reader because that license plate reader is real time. So versus.
Location information too.
Correct, it would tag location, GPS, so it would actually know all these factors in one reading. So.
Yeah, I mean, those are very good points. There's a couple of questions. Do we have an idea how many signs we have, or signs, that says this enforcement 72 hours? Because I haven't seen one. I think this was brought up on the council meeting that I think by a resident, also by some of the councils, that that could be a good idea, to get some signs there. And obviously the question is going to be, do we go with 74 hours or 24 hours? But having more signs there, I think it would help. And then the other question I have, what are the ways to report, from residents, people that are more than X amount of time, just in general? I know, we're talking about the last, doing this, but just right now, what is the way to report vehicles that are being parked there for longer than they're supposed to?
You mean currently?
Yes.
They would call the police department, and then we would go out and evaluate each report of a parking issue.
So you don't have like a way, like sending a picture or email or something like that?
There is a submission page, but that it can have a delay. But if they want immediate action, then they would just call our non-dispatch number.
Got it. So, I guess in terms of signage, what's your feeling on that, Karen? Are the streets have a lot? Do you think they have a lot of those signs or no?
Have you seen the California Vehicle Code? It's like this thick. I don't know that we can just put out that particular sign. There's a lot in the code. So this one woman that talked about Alvarado I think it's on the side of the street where the Brisbane Elementary is. So there are no homes. Maybe we can put a couple signs there, but I don't know if we can't put them all over town. There's so many laws in the vehicle code that we're not putting signs up in town for.
We might want to look around and see where would be the most strategic places, like where you enter town, and a couple other places, that explain that it's limited parking, or that it is a restricted parking area in some way. I mean, sure, it could be managed down to just a couple of words on a sign or a few words, but some signs might be necessary, maybe not a whole bunch.
If I may, I think if you were to put this parking permit in place, or if it was to pass, then it would benefit the city to put signs at the entrances of towns that certain areas are permitted areas only. We generally do not sign for California Vehicle Code because that is a vehicle code that is, the 72-hour parking rule is enforceable in every city and in all of California. So we don't generally put signs that reiterate the California Vehicle Code. Those are laws that they should know already. But if you have, how about that? Right. So, but if you have a parking permit city, I think you should put that in the entrances of your town saying certain areas are permitted parking only. So that way they have, or if you want to sign certain streets saying you're entering a permitted street. That way they know, because a lot of times when we do give out citations based on whether it's a, red zone violation or whatever the parking violation may be, and we do put signage, there's always going to be a rebel that the sign was not big enough. So that's why we don't sign the California Vehicle Code of violations that apply in certain areas, only because there's always going to be that back and forth. And that's it. Every driver should know those things.
Yeah, I think, I agree with Linda. We should have some sort of signage, especially for those street, Thomas, Tulare, King, Alvarado, and Humboldt, that they're experiencing the most problem with parking space. They like 90% fulfill. And
As,
that was brought up on the council meeting too.
as Councilwoman Karen said, at that meeting, that Tulare Street's a whole lot better now because one person had many, many cars. So, I don't think we really need to put them on all those streets. I think there just needs to be some general visual here and there that says this residential area is permit parking. Other words are probably more appropriate, but again, too many signs is kind of like visual garbage, and difficult. Probably that's something we need to work on is signage, another subcommittee.
I mean, I didn't know about this 72 hours, to be honest. And, I have a license for the last 30 years. So, to assume that everybody knows this, that might not be the case. The other thing is, signs, they do alert people and they sort of, prevent that. That's why you got stop signs and so forth. I mean, that's just my opinion. So any more comments on that 72 hours?
I guess for the signage, maybe would it be an idea to hold until we figure out if it's gonna be 24 or 72, because that might also impact. Because I do, agree with the 72-hour, maybe we don't need too many signs because it is law, but maybe if it's 24-hour, then more signage would be appropriate.
I would agree with that. I think for that topic, we kind of have to see what the LAS kind of says in terms of the cost, if they can even do a separate time than what we discussed before, and if they would change the cost structure, and then based that, decide if we want to go for the 24-hour parking permit program versus the current design that we had, which was the 10 p.m. till 6 o'clock in the morning type of designation. Yeah, or 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. if that's even better feasibly, depending, right?
So this topic is not totally answered. I think, there's other stuff that we should probably wait until finalize it. And then I guess one question would be, should we put this into a subcommittee, or we just wait to get that other information and address it?
I think we want the committee to be recommending policy, and then in terms of what the sign language is, we would do that. Staff would come up with that. So I don't know that you need the information about what LAS can provide before really talking about signs. And it doesn't seem like you'd need a whole subcommittee just to figure that out.
Right. Okay, so for the sake of time, and Linda had asked if we could conclude the meeting at 8. Why don't we keep going? What will be the next? So I guess for the other, so we have, just to recap, we have those topics that were shuffled to subcommittee, right? And then there's some pending information to address other topics. But in the meanwhile, these questions, we're going to study them more, so to speak. So I guess in that case, can you go back to to those questions just to see if we get a little bit of homework here? Okay, so we looked at in a bundle way, so to speak, multi-generation, and then the codified one, and then the trade vehicle. That's going to be one topic, and that's Darius and Gregory are going to look into that. And then we had other stuff that we need information, and I trust that Thomas has those topics.
Yeah, I have quite a few questions for Laz now. And I would just a piece of advice, maybe think about the hypothetical. So like, let's say Laz comes back and they can do this. Is it something you would support? Is it something you would, just for next meeting? Like we're saying, in the interest of keeping it moving along. But yeah, like first thing on my list, ask Laz, but 4 questions I have. So get on that.
Cool. So what other topic should we, take home and sort of hone in into who's resident, work vehicle, suggestion, enforcement, minister? Well,
Work vehicles is kind of in the codification.
that
Yeah.
one's So there was one topic, how we administer permit is a big question from Mayor Davis. Is this something that staff can address?
Yeah, that's the consultant. I mean, and we didn't go into a lot of great detail, but there's a consultant that administers these type of permits for other cities that's that $5,000 one-time setup fee, and they can process, they can coordinate the enforcement and the database. So, yeah.
Right. So it's a matter of, you go and pay online or you get your tickets, that sort of execution mainly driven by the by Laz, if we go with them. Okay. So I think for now nothing pops up, but if anybody reads it and then wants to send an email to staff saying, you know what, I have questions on this, or why not? And then we could work. You could work on those, and I'll do the same. So let's move on with the agenda. So new business, none. Staff updates.
Yeah, I feel like I've had the same one for like 5 months because it's just one more month, something else happens. But Crocker Trail, we're going to be awarding it tomorrow at the city council meeting to a contractor that came in with a low bid that we were happy with. So yeah, once that gets figured out with city council, it's just a matter of getting them out there. So yeah, but yeah, we have our contractor, E.E. Gilbert. I don't imagine anyone's heard of him, but maybe.
Cool. Chair and committee members matters. Does anybody has a matter that wants to bring up? Everybody says nothing. So our next meeting is going to be June 7th, 2023, and the meeting has adjourned. Thank you all.